Thank you so much again, Kit, for accepting an interview with us. This is the Korean War Veteran Digital Memorial Project. And how did you know about this KWDM project, and how do you feel about participating in this project? And why are you interested in participating in this project?
Well, I heard about the project through the Korean War Veterans Association National Convention when you were down there. And as far as my being here today, I am all for this type of program. I think that more information like this needs to be out for people where they can go and search, get information, because, and I hate to even use the words, but forgotten war, but basically it really has been. And the United States after World War II didn't really want to have another war, and so today even politicians, when they're speaking, they'll start naming the wars, and it'll be World War II, Vietnam. They completely skip over the Korean War.
Great. Could you introduce yourself?
My name is Keith Fannon. I'm 82 years old. I was born in McPherson, Kansas.
When?
In 1930, January of 1930. And I had an older sister and two younger brothers. All three of those are deceased now. And I'm the last in the family. Locally, I do have a daughter here in Liverpool and a son in Erie, Pennsylvania. And both of them have families, extended families. So even to my great-grandchildren, they're all in Erie.
Could you talk about the schools that you went, high school?
The high school, I graduated from high school in Emporia, Kansas. It's about 110 miles west of Kansas City. And then Brookhaven College in Dallas, Texas.
When did you graduate?
From
college?
Oh, no. Well, my college was a broken up thing, so that really, it's still ongoing.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I unfortunately didn't get to go for 4 years. It didn't work out that way for me.
I know that you moved from the chapter in Texas to the central New York,
in
right?
fact,
When did you, can you talk about that?
The guys that may look at this and say, the uniform doesn't look like ours. I was with the chapter 270, Sam Johnson chapter in Dallas, Texas. In fact, I was the vice president there. And when they decided on a uniform, we decided to wear UN blue shirts instead of the white shirts that a lot of the others had. And so I was voted in as vice president almost immediately upon joining the chapter, and had to resign then when I decided to move to Baldwinsville, New York.
Okay, so what was your first reaction when you heard about the Korean War broke out and you had to fight for it? Have you known of Korea before? And what was your first impression and feeling that you thought about that I have to go to Korea and fight for the country? What was your first reaction? Could you please describe?
Yes, I did know where Korea was. At the end of World War II, I had a very good friend that was stationed there. And when he came home, he told me about Korea. And so I had volunteered for overseas duty and was stationed on Naha, Okinawa.
When was it?
I got there 10 days before the Korean War started. I was assigned to the 51st Fighter Interceptor Wing. And on Sunday, when the war started, they brought us all out into the squadron area, announced that North Korea had attacked South Korea, and that we should stand by for further information later in that afternoon. They came back and said, okay, you're all going to go through supply, be issued full field gear, weapons, everything except ammunition. And from then on, it was very hectic because the plan was to take the entire wing with the exception of one fighter squadron. So we took 2 fighter squadrons with us, which were F-80 shooting stars. And in September in advance of the Inchon invasion. Why, we boarded the Sergeant Antelak, a World War II Liberty ship, and went to Japan, staged at Itazuki Air Force Base in Japan, and then went in with the Inchon invasion.
I mean Incheon landing.
Yeah. The Inchon landing, and almost immediately the Marines, one group of the Marines, went north and took over Kimpo Airfield. And so I was on the first plane that landed at Kimpo then. As far as my feelings, and I've explained this a lot of times, pardon me, to a lot of Korean friends, that I liken this situation to going to school and the bully is picking on my little brother. Wasn't going to happen. So I didn't mind going to Korea. I felt the South Korean people needed help. I was ready.
What was your first reaction when you saw the Korea for the first time in your life? How was it? Can you describe it?
Well, yes. What I saw immediately was almost nothing. Everything was blown up, burned, you name it. Going into Kimpo, the one large building there was the Northwest Airlines terminal building. And other than that, there really wasn't a lot left. One building that we referred to as the pagoda-style building was to the right of the terminal building. And as it turned out later on, I had hired a young Korean fellow to be my interpreter, and his father was the architect of that building. While there, I hired about 300 Koreans to work at the base, as well as contractors. I was the driver and guard for our CO, and once a month we would load a Jeep trailer with money to go and pay the contractors off, and then they would pay the workers.
When did you enlist in the military? What branch did you enlist into, and what was your specialty unit? And when did you rotate to your destination?
I was going to be drafted, and I didn't want to go to the Army. So 6 of my friends and I, we all went and enlisted in the Air Force. That was in December 1948.
Where?
And
Where were you?
Well, I enlisted at Topeka, Kansas. That was the closest enlistment station to where I lived.
So you lived in Kansas?
Yes, at that time.
Mm-hmm.
My father was with Shell Oil. We had moved Texas, Kansas, Oklahoma, back and forth. But we went to Lackland, went through basic there, and I went to administrative school in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and was stationed at 3 bases stateside. And the job that I had, I was getting kind of burnt out, so I said, the United States is not at war with anyone right now. It's a good time to volunteer to go overseas.
So you went to Japan?
Went to Naha, Okinawa. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really had wanted to go to Spain, but it didn't work out that way.
So you wanted to go to Spain, but ended up in Japan?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you go where they tell you, not where you want to go.
Where did you go through basic training? Do you have any additional training or any story that you want to share with us about your experience before you shipping into Korea?
Well, went to basic in Lackland, San Antonio, Texas. Upon graduation there, they sent me to administrative school at Fort Francis C. Warren in Cheyenne, Wyoming.
Okay.
The Air Force had a number of schools on that Army post. Upon graduating from there, I was sent to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, There was a small air base there. Our primary duty was to fly generals in and out to go to the War College at Fort Leavenworth. Eventually was stationed at Selfridge Air Force Base, headquarters, 10th Air Force. And that was where I decided I wanted to go overseas.
So you flew over to Korea and arrived in Gimpo?
No.
No?
We went from San Francisco to Naha aboard the General Nelson M. Walker troop ship. That was the largest troop ship in the Pacific. And then we took another ship from there to Japan and then flew into Gimpo.
Right, right. When was the day, the first day you arrived at Gimpo?
Pardon me. I think it was October 2nd,
October
1950.
Okay.
I think it was approximately 2 weeks after the Incheon landing.
2 weeks after the Incheon landing. Could you describe the living conditions while you're online? Describe about the food that you had.
Well, when we first got to Gimpo, we were eating sea rations. These were World War II rations that had been stored in a cave on Okinawa. And we brought those with us until later on when we were able to actually set up a field kitchen and have hot meals. And so, these rations could have been boxed up back in 1940, 41, 42. The little biscuits that are in there, you either had to soak them in water or take a hammer or something and pound them to break them up in small pieces so you could eat them. The little chocolate bars that were in there made by Hershey, they were white. It was just a coating that appeared on the chocolate bar from being stored in the heat on Okinawa, I suppose. Then we got our own kitchen, started having, I think for a place in Korea for us, we probably had very good chow. And then later on, there was a time when we actually lived on K rations, which were a big improvement over the C rations. Again, they were from World War II.
Any other memories about living conditions?
Well, being the driver and guard for the commander, I drove all over South Korea. And we would always take rations with us because we never knew where we were going to be. Never once did I eat in a Korean restaurant or anything while I was there. Today, I eat Korean food whenever I get a chance. Whether it's mandu, kalbi, you name it, I'm there. Kimchi, a lot of guys say can't eat kimchi, but I like kimchi.
So could you describe the area that you served? You were in the Gimpo, and then after that, could you describe where you went and what was your mission and the battle that you involved? And tell me exactly from when to when you were in Korea and doing what?
Yeah, I was actually, I was with the 51st Fighter Wing. We took part in 6 of the 10 major offensives in Korea. But our jets flew missions over North Korea from the day we landed. And then in December, when the Chinese came in, we had to evacuate and go back to Itazuki, Japan. That was in December, just before Christmas of '50, in order to save our planes. There we moved on to Suiki Air Base in Japan, which was the base where the Japanese Navy trained their kamikaze pilots. Then in May of 1951, they had changed my duties. I was now investigating aircraft accidents. And a lot of our pilots were flying missions out of Suwon, Korea. So the officer I worked with, he and I were sent advance party to Suwon, and I stayed at Suwon then until January of '52 when I came home. In November of '51, the 51st changed over from F-80s to F-86s, Sabre jets. And, pardon me, later on, I understand those planes were transferred to the South Korean Air Force.
How many sorties do you remember during the war?
Thousands, literally thousands.
I heard that North Koreans were really afraid of Allied forces of Air Force. Could you describe that situation?
Well,
what was the impact of this Air Force raid and attacks?
We did a lot of ground support. In other words, our guys would get right down close to the deck. And I think probably one of the things that bothered the North Koreans and the Chinese the most was our use of napalm bombs. We even had occasions where we found tunnels, and our guys were able to drop the napalm so it would actually bounce and go into the entrance of the tunnel. And between rockets, machine guns, and napalm bombs, pardon me, they caused a lot of problems for the Chinese and North Korean troops. We were also bridge busters. We tore down a lot of bridges that they were using.
Were there any moment you faced North Koreans or the Chinese soldiers one-to-one or face-to-face?
Yeah, can you pardon me just a moment? Pardon me. Yeah. Third day in Korea, I had to take the CO to 8th Army headquarters in Seoul. Yeah, the South Korean troops went across and up into this building, and they brought the sniper back out of there. And so the CO told me, he says, park the Jeep, let's go in and see what's going on. Well, this poor guy had gotten left behind when everybody else moved back north, and probably very hungry, which was a good thing for me because his aim wasn't so good. But the South Koreans took care of him. We didn't have to do anything. That was one of my closest. I was shot at a few other times, but I didn't feel any danger for them. I didn't think they were close. I protected the CO, and he thanked me when I transferred to another squadron. He said he'd never even had to draw his pistol. I'd always taken care of business for him.
So you, in the beginning, you repaired the aircraft, and then
No, I investigated aircraft.
Investigated from the beginning to the end of your duties, right?
No, at first, as I say, I was the driver and guard for the CO, hired workers for the base. It was when I went back into Korea the second time at Suwon that I started investigating accidents. And I continued to do that until I left Korea in January of '52.
Did you have experience working with the Korean soldier Ptsd at the time?
No.
What is your experience? Any Korean soldiers that you worked with together, or any experience working with any Korean civilians?
Well, a lot of experience with Korean civilians, but and a few Korean soldiers. I needed a Korean soldier that spoke some English on one mission, okay? And it was very good. He was very good. He was a lot of help to me.
Do you remember his name?
No, unfortunately, no. It's kind of a situation that you try not to get too close to a lot of people because they may not be there tomorrow.
Mm.
And yeah, because I lost a lot of friends, mostly pilots. one of them coming back from a mission over North Korea. And I went down to the runway because he was trying to get back with the plane. And they kept urging him to ditch and get out of the plane. But he managed to get back, and just as he got over my head at the end of the runway, his plane exploded. And, yeah.
What about your experience working with the Korean civilians? What was
It
your...
was very good. I always remember one particular instance where it was getting cold and we were trying to put stoves in our tents. We got the stoves, but no pipe to run up through the top of the tent to get rid of the fumes and the smoke. And so I got to talking with some of the Korean workers, and I had my interpreter there, and I told him, I said, this is what I need. After he talked to the workers a while, two of them came over and says, no, we can make the pipe. We just need such and such. We got the tools that they needed, and they made the pipe for us, which was very good. Yeah.
So they are very able.
Yes. Yes, I found some very capable workers amongst the guys that we hired. Many of them were, just for common labor, but we had many skilled people as well. Some were electricians, plumbers, No, I had a good time working with the Koreans.
What were the most difficult, or the happiest, or the rewarding memories during your duties? Could you share that?
Well, I'll try with the most difficult first, and hopefully I get through this. In driving the CO to Seoul many times, I found in one area where there were many orphans. I'm guessing they were anywhere from 3 to maybe at the oldest 10 years old. Whether their parents had been killed or they just got separated, who knows. But the South Korean government at that time was still in such chaos that they had no agencies going around to try and take care of these children. So I made a habit every time I'd leave the base to go to Seoul, I would stop by our mess tent and take as much food as I possibly could. But of course, it was never enough. But the thing that really got to me was the fact that if you would give a child a biscuit, they would never eat the whole thing. They would share that biscuit for as many as it could go around to. But then as the weather started, and of course, I'd get there sometimes and maybe one or two of them had died. But then when the weather started getting very cold in November and December, I started finding many of the children that had died when I got there. And there wasn't really anything that I could do as far as burials or anything like that. But I would pour water in my hand and just wash their face and put their hands on their chest. It was all I could do. But other than losing my friends, that was probably the worst. The good parts, yes, there were good things. I had hired a young Korean boy. I got a phone call one day from the APs at the gate. And they said, I've got a young boy out here, he wants to come and work. Are you hiring boys? And I said, well, how old is he? And of course they made a guess, oh, maybe 10. And I said, does he speak any English? Yeah, he does. I said, I'm coming out to the gate. Come on out. And real nice, and very neat, and did speak some English. And I thought, okay. He explained to me his situation and really needed money. And so I said, okay, I'll hire you to take care of the CO's tent. Well, when I told the CO, he was not happy. I don't need some little kid underfoot in here. And I says, no, I says, he speaks some English and I think he can be a help. He can keep your canteens filled. He can sweep out your tent, keep it clean and neat. And that was Chang. His father was a Protestant minister, had a little church just outside of the gates of Kimpo. And the North Koreans had taken his father, killed his mother. He had an older sister, and so they were living in the back of the church. And she had also taken in 2 or 3 other orphans from the area there, probably farmers' children or something. And so from then on, I used to, if I was around when he was leaving in the evening, I would give him food and I'd walk off the base with him and then I could give it to him. He couldn't take it off because they'd accuse him of stealing. And while I'd go into town, sometimes I'd buy fruit and bring it back and drop it off at the church. I even have some very poor video taken by one of my friends. The guys had taught him how to make a snowman in the snow. And in the video, it shows the CO coming out trying to find his cap, because Chang had taken his cap and put it on the snowman. But the old man liked him. He really did. In fact, when we had to leave, he smuggled him into Japan. And I told him, you can't do that. I says, you've got to get him back to Kimpo, because his sister will wonder what happened to him. And so they did. They got him back to Kimpo.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Do you remember his name?
Chang is the only name I have. Yeah.
Okay. How old was he?
About 10, I'm guessing. So his sister was maybe 2 years older, I'm guessing. In fact, when I started sending food and that, she insisted then on doing my laundry as payment for what I was doing for them. Yeah. And then at Suwon, I had hired another interpreter. And I was very lucky. I had 2 young interpreters, maybe between 18 and 20 years old. And they both spoke quite good English and did an excellent job of interpreting for me with the people I had to work with. And the interpreter at Suwon, his name was Lee Yoon Chip. I have a letter that he wrote to me.
You still keep it?
Yes.
Sure. Can you share that with us?
Yes.
Great. Okay. You talk about the difficult and happiest time, but is there anything that really haunts you, that kind of trauma that still bothers you?
Yes.
Could you talk about that a little bit?
I can try. Yes. In fact, I have extreme Ptsd experiences. friend's plane blown up. Another case of two friends.
You saw him
Oh yeah.
on that moment?
Yes, I was on the ground looking up at his plane when it exploded.
Yeah.
And for 2 hours after that, I walked into the runway, trying to find anything that we could send back to his family. But when a plane explodes like that, it basically just vaporizes the body. The other occasion happened back at Kimpo with the two friends, mid-air collision, killed both of them.
And you witnessed that?
Yeah. And again, I was there trying to find bits and pieces to have something. But that case really didn't end there. Many years later, I received a phone call from a gentleman, I believe in the state of Washington. He had seen my website, and he says that he had a brother that flew with us and was killed. And they were looking, they said they really never got a lot of information from the Air Force. And he was wondering if I could help. And he gave me the name. And yeah, it was one of the guys that was in the air collision.
Oh.
And the 51st has reunions every year in September. And before the next reunion, I was able to locate his brother's crew chief. And so we invited him to come to the reunion. And he got to spend a few hours with the crew chief. It meant a lot to that family.
Must have been very hard for you.
And, of course, with the little children, I still have nightmares. Very sad. I couldn't say it. Sorry.
Oh no, I didn't mean to bring you back to that memory, but thank you for sharing that stories with us. There must be a lot of those similar stories and still bothering many of criminal veterans.
Yes.
So when were you discharged from military service, and what were the reaction of the people when you returned from Korea? By the way, what was your family's reaction to the fact that you were supposed to you were dispatched to Korea to fight there? And so you can compare those when you return from your service, and what do they say about you returning safe to home?
Yeah. Well, all right. I said I left Korea in January 10th, '52, and came back stateside and was stationed at Rantoul, Illinois Air Base, and then was discharged in September of 1952. But when I went to Korea, of course, this was back before no cell phones, no internet, so mail, and it took 30 days for a letter to get to the States, 30 days for a return letter. And I wrote my parents as soon as they would let us. And I said, okay, I'm no longer on Okinawa. I'm now in Korea. And told them what I was doing. And my mother wrote back. And she told me the family was very proud of what I was doing.
How old
Yeah,
your mom at the time?
my mother died when she was 85, many years ago. Yeah.
So
But,
what?
my family had always raised me to help friends and neighbors. But, they thought that it was a great thing, what we were doing. When I got back home, though, and again, this forgotten war thing, I would meet people on the street that I'd known for years, and they'd say, "Dan, I haven't seen you. Where have you been?" Well, in the Korean War. But what? They didn't even know about the war. See, this was all before television was, no news, just, no, people really didn't know about it.
Why do you think it was forgotten to them? Why was it that
Well,
so unpopular and almost ignored by your own people?
Well, the only way they had of hearing about it, really, was if they go to a movie, and there they would have newsreel, and there would be some information about the Korean War. So that's what my family did mostly. They would go to the movies maybe once every 2 weeks or something, just to hear something about the Korean War, because it took so long for my letters to get to them. So. But we didn't have problems that maybe Vietnam vets had with people spit on because they'd been killing babies. That was nonsense. But we just came back and nobody had any idea of what you'd been doing.
Any impact in your life from the service that you from Korea?
Yes.
In your life after that?
Yes. As I say, I have extreme PTSD, and that affected my life considerably. It's a disease there's no cure for, and they didn't even know what it really was back in those days. And I never admitted to any of my friends or family, I never admitted to anyone the problems I was having. And, but not until 2005.
What happened in 2005? You don't have to share. Don't want.
I was going to commit suicide.
Because of that. Are you okay now?
And so I went to the VA, and the psychiatrist has been working with me ever since. And they do an excellent job.
So are those traumas that you experienced during your service still bothering you?
Oh, yes. They never go away.
About the legacy of Korean War veterans, and do you have any message to the future generations of the United States and Korea?
Well, I don't believe I have ever met a Korean War veteran that says, I wished I had never been there. They're all proud of what they did. And the one thing that really strikes me as a big difference between the Korean War and, say, World War I, World War II, the other wars, the Korean people don't forget us. I have many, many Korean friends. And, I've been invited to many Korean homes here in the States. And, it means a lot. The United States didn't have that same situation with other countries that had gone to hell. The other countries, all they were looking for was money. Yes, we gave money to South Korea. Look what they did. Man, look at that country now. It's great.
Have you been back to Korea?
No,
No?
I want to.
You want to. Do you know about what happened after the Korean War in Korea in terms of economic development and
Yes,
democracy?
yes.
What do you think about that?
Oh, I think it's unbelievable. Yes. No, again, all of my friends, they're very proud of what's happening in Korea. I have one friend, his screensaver on his computer is the space shuttle of the Korean Peninsula with all the lights in the south and dark in the north. Yes.
I hope that you can have a chance to visit Korea back and
I'd like
see the difference between those times that you fought for Koreans and now.
Way back when somebody had asked me, before they had the revisit program and all that, said, would you really want to go back? I said, yeah. I would like to go back and see Korea with trees that are all in one piece.
Any specific messages to the young generations to come?
Yes. Anytime you get a chance to help another country, do it. Yes. If I was younger, I'd do it again.
Next year, 2013,
Yes.
will be 60 years anniversary of Korean armistice of the Korean War.
Yes.
There is no war lasted 60 years after an official ceasefire in 20th century history. Korea has been divided, suffered from it. Would you sign the petition if you are asked to end the Korean War officially and replace the armistice with the peace treaty?
Yeah, I don't think my signature's not going to help, but I would love to see that happen.
You want to see the closure on it, right?
Oh, yes. There's been so many people killed on the DMZ. It's unbelievable. Yeah. I heard a friend speak one time, and he says DMZ is such a misnomer. There is no D in DMZ. It's one of the most highly militarized areas in the world. I've had friends serve in the 2ID on the DMZ. In fact, the 2ID of the DMZ sent me, I have a piece of the original barbed wire that was used up there.
Yeah, there are lots of problems in the Korean Peninsula, especially the confrontation between U.S. and North Korea and South Korea, nuclear weapons problem. But I still think that we can declare symbolically the end of Korean War, replacing the armistice with the peace treaty, and we can move ahead to settle a lot of different issues. So,
Do you think the North would sign that?
no, it doesn't
No.
matter whether
Oh,
they
okay.
sign it or
I was
not.
gonna
but
say, yeah.
As a Korean War
Yeah.
veterans
Yes.
who fought that war,
Yes.
and now on average age is 82,
Yeah.
and I'm just asking to see if you want to see an
Sure.
official closure on it.
Yeah.
From your perspective, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter what North Koreans react to that, or I'm not going to even talk about that with North Koreans.
No.
So would you sign that?
Sure.
Would you shake hands if it arranged to meet with the former enemies of North Korean soldiers and Chinese soldiers? If they're alive.
I've already shook the hand of one
You
North
did?
Korean. He lives in Florida. He's a friend of mine. No Kum-sak.
Hmm.
He's the North Korean pilot that brought the new MiG into Kimpo in 1953. I know he and his wife.
And you shook hands with him? You ready to shake more?
Yeah, I think I could, maybe. Yeah.
Any other message or comments that you want to make
Yeah,
before we finish it
I
up?
would like to say I'm so glad to see you doing this program. It gives a lot of people one place where they can go and try and find some type of information about the Korean War that in the past there's really never been any place. I've had a lot of people go to my website and then send me emails. We never knew about this. We never knew this happened, or you know. And,
It's a digital clearinghouse of interviews and many different kinds of artifacts.
yeah.
And it's a database so that people can come back and retrieve it with the keywords. So I think it's the first of its kind.
Yeah.
And I want to expand it to all other Korean War veterans
Yeah.
all around the state. 2.2 million Korean War veterans still alive, and I want to do it before it gets too late.
They're dying very fast. I'm very fortunate in 82 that I'm still in pretty good health. Yeah.
Thank you again so much for your acceptance of this interview and sharing all those happy but also very difficult moments with us. And I think it will serve as a history that we can preserve for our future generations and for the country. That the U.S. and Republic of Korea. Thank you so much, and I want to present this Ambassador for Peace Medal issued by the Ministry of Patriots and Veterans Affairs
Yes.
and Korean Veterans Association.
Yes.
Thank you so much again.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's, in the past, you had to go back to Korea to receive this. Oh, yes, thank you very much.